Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the February 11th, 2025 meeting of the Planning Board. The board is here in person, and we do have people joining us remotely, but since we are all in the room, we do not need to do any of the formal remote stuff. So we will move to the first agenda item, which is the definitive of subdivision public hearing. I'll just read this out, I guess, in accordance with the provisions of MGLH Chapter 141, Section 81-T, and the Town of Concord Subdivision Rules and Regulations, to review the definitive subdivision plan application of Deborah and Paul Okaniff for the improvement of a new roadway and the creation of 2 building lots at 61B Walden Street, parcel number 0274-2, the applicant has requested a continuance without discussion to the March 4th meeting, which we will do at 7 o'clock that day. 7, well, we'll confirm. 7. Yep. Do we need to vote on that?
So I make a motion.
You need a motion.
We just need to figure out exactly what time it is, and then we can make that motion.
7:15.
7:15.
I make a motion that we continue the application by Deborah and Paul O'Connor to the 3-4 meeting at 7:15 p.m.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, that is unanimous. And with that, we will move on to the 7:05 discussion. The 2025 ATM Continuing Care Retirement Community Zoning Overlay District, which is a citizen petition. Whoever's here for that.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. Mark Bobrowski, my office is in Damon Mill. I'm representing NEDA, New England Deacon Association, in this application for a zoning amendment. We have been working on this. I'm sure you've heard on the street that the property across from the hospital was sold some time ago, and NEDA is the successful bidder for the property. So we're here to try to make something of it. It currently is 7 residential lots, all zoned R80. Obviously abandoned or discontinued, and not really usable in their current circumstances. Whether or not the buildings are actually useful, the amount of money that changed hands here would not make 7 homes reasonable use of the property. So what we're here to do is make a proposal that the town meeting, through you, consider continuing care retirement community overlay district. Deaconess is a continuing care retirement community. With me tonight is the director of Deaconess, Chris Cintros. This is Larry Beals. He's our engineer who will give you a bit more detail later on matters civil. And then we've also got online Randy Arsenault from MDM, who will come in last as we walk through the PowerPoint to give you some feeling on what traffic situation might be out there. So if we could go to the PowerPoint, I think it's a good place to start. Chris, why don't you take it from here, a few slides in, and then I'll take it back.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us tonight. I'm Chris Cintros, CEO of New England Deaconess. Here on behalf of Newbury Court. Newbury Court is a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community, CCRC. Newbury Court is the modern iteration of New England Deaconess, and New England Deaconess has served the Concord community on its current site next to Emerson Hospital since about 1910. Newbury Court this year is celebrating its 30th anniversary, and it's a great place to be. So really a lot has changed in 115 years that our organization has been on the current site. One of the only things that has not changed about the current site is how much space we have. So we have been on the exact same footprint for 115 years, little by little by little, the campus has evolved. And what's happening now is really, we are nearing our capacity. I think we have a little bit more, but we are nearly maxed out on what we can do on this site. This is happening right at the time when the demographics are really requiring more and more units and more need. So I think most of us know the town of Concord itself is already at 20% of the population over the age of 65. In only 5 years, that's gonna be 34%. So inside of 5 years, 1 in 3 Concordians is projected to be over the age of 65. So as Mark mentioned, we're hoping to meet that need by rezoning the land that we purchased from Emerson Hospital across the street. You know, Newburyport itself, I'd ask everybody to think about Newburyport as a not-for-profit community resource. And it's a not-for-profit community resource at a time when the community need is growing. And we've added literally 125 people to our wait list in the calendar year of 2024. And our wait list now is over 430 people. So what is a CCRC? And I'm not sure who I should ask. Are you doing the slides?
Yep.
If you can just push us forward a slide. You know, the basics, what is a CCRC? The CCRC offers a whole range of services and housing accommodations that allow folks to age in place in the way that they want to. And so that means different things for different people over the course of time. The folks that move into CCRCs are typically folks that want to be proactive in planning for a certain stage of life. Sort of like when you choose a college, you know, there's a certain stage of life that goes with it. Most folks that move into CCRCs are doing exactly that. They're making a long-term plan for a chapter of their life, really so that they can be in control of it. The CCRC is tied together by a lifetime lease. And so regardless of the location, regardless of the services that are offered, there is a lifetime lease that follows the resident and the relationship between the institution and that person. A not-for-profit CCRC, you know, has the mandate really to provide both health and financial security for older adults. You know, that's one of the things that sort of differentiates us from what people would sometimes think of is, oh, that's just another assisted living, or that's just another independent living. And the housing options, of course, have a whole range of different styles. If we could move one more slide. So there's two different groups of services that are offered at a CCRC. The first are hospitality and lifestyle services. The goal of those hospitality and lifestyle services, again, are to help folks live the lifestyle that not only they want, but that's going to support a growing health span. You know, people want to live longer, healthier, which is great. These services are designed to support that. You know, dining services, transportation, housekeeping, fitness, emergency response, the programming, the arts and culture, 24-hour staff on site are all typically offered in the independent living section and are part of that successful aging process. The healthcare services, which folks typically prefer not to think ahead about, but they become really important when they're important, include the nursing case management, the support with activities of daily living, memory programming, memory assisted living, short-term skilled nursing, long-term skilled nursing, inpatient therapy, and outpatient therapy. So there's a whole range of services that are available to folks when the time comes. And what I'd really underscore, really more than anything of the whole presentation here is, you know, we are fundamentally and have always been for 135 years, a service organization. And so as time has gone by, more and more sort of investment type products have really taken over the senior living space. We still are in that 20% minority of not-for-profit senior living providers. And I just have to say it, being next to a hospital could not be better. You know, so to have a local community-based hospital right next to us it's just perfect. So I'll maybe thank Mark for being here on his birthday, but also ask him to speak a little bit more about the CCRC overlay.
40 years of being a land use lawyer, I can't remember the last time I spent my birthday at home. So I think it's important to emphasize the distinction that we bring to you this evening. This is a CCRC. If you Google mass.gov CCRC, you're going to find maybe 40 statewide. I didn't count them, but that looks like a pretty good estimate. And some of them are better than others, obviously. And this is one of the best. To me, as a layperson, the distinction really focuses on as Chris said, the choice. So what are your choices when you age? And need to think about what happens at the final stage, really. You can have home care, and many people make that choice and it works for them. You can have freestanding assisted living and skilled nursing, but you don't have a contract that you sign when you enter that really requires or obligates is a better word, the CCRC to keep you in place when your money runs out, which is really what the attraction of this is. You get to live there after the money runs out. You convert to Medicaid, and that Medicaid payment isn't what requires enough to allow Chris to meet his budget, but it's enough because you signed a lifetime contract when you entered to age in place. And so this is really, I view it as, he said college education, I view it as a third option for your last phase of life. And it's really a very unique option in the sense that you're signing a contract and you're moving within the facility from the intake level, independent living, into assisted living, eventually memory care if you need it, and skilled nursing at the end of the day. I lost my mother 2 years ago, last week, and she did that in Glen Eyre, North Carolina, where she and my dad moved, and died at 94. But I watched her go from independent to assisted to, my dad needed the memory care. My mom went to long-term care. And we always told her, behave, Mom, because you don't want to have a problem when the Medicaid, when your money runs out. And I think she made it very close to the end before the money ran out. But she knew that she could stay there. And what a relief that is for somebody to have at age 94 to know that they're not going to have to pack a box and get out of here in 6 months when the last money is drained from the bank account. But that's my perspective as a layperson on what this offers. I'm going to walk you through some key provisions of the zoning that we've drafted, and I don't see it on anybody's plate. So if you circulate that.
They all got it, trust me.
Hey, just got an old school paper guy. So this is an overlay district that will be superimposed over the existing districts. Right now, the existing districts under this 12.1 acre parcel are all R80. Just to give you a contrast here, the zoning across the street at Newbury Court today, which is not a part of the overlay district, is medical professional. And it's actually medical professional too, because it has slightly different rules than across the highway, north and south of Route 2, different medical professional districts. Newbury Court is in a medical professional district. So right across Ornac is zoned residential. We're not proposing to change that. We're proposing to overlay this 12.1 acres with what we're calling the CCRCOD. And it will provide an option. You could rebuild the residential houses there if you wanted to, but this provides another option going forward. Can I have the next slide? So the maximum permissible density here, as we propose, is 16 units. And that's 16 units outside the floodplain conservancy and wetlands conservancy district. And I believe that language is used in the PRD in terms of counting the denominator for the calculation of yield. We chose 16 because, to be frank, the maximum permissible density that we envision on the 12.1 acres, and there's some slides that will illustrate that momentarily, would be approximately 200 units. Across the street at Newbury Court, that's a 34.88 acre parcel. This is on the, that would be the east side of Old Ornac. That's 34.88 acres, but only 18.4 acres of that is dry, and there's 301 units. If you divide 18.4 by 3 into 301 units, you get 16 units an acre. So we're proposing the same density on the other side of Ornac in the overlay district as we already have at Newbury Court. And I'm sure you know the facility and drive by it all the time. And it certainly has been a fixture within the community that hasn't disturbed anybody. At least we haven't heard any reports of it. There also has to be a 20% open space quotient within the common, within the CCRCOD, and that open space again has to be upland. So there's 50% upland, 50% wetland. breakout in the common open space, but I'm pleased to report there's not an ounce of wetland in the CCR COD. We just took other provisions of the bylaw and made it a part of the density calculation. Nor are there any acres located within the floodplain conservancy district or the wetlands conservancy district. It's pretty much an esker. If you know the golf course, it's the 10th fairway sloping back towards Ornac. And you can actually see the old buildings in there kind of in the shadows today. They're still there. They're gonna have to come down. 6 of them probably represent no issue for the historic commission. But there is one building that was, it's on Macris as a 1790 building. Although we're told that the value of it as an historic structure has greatly diminished with work over time. And we'll do our due diligence to go to the historic commission to get permission for the demo when and if we choose to go forward. The maximum permissible depth. So this is the more detailed proposal with regard to the architecture. We think that what we're going to end up doing, we don't have a specific exact plan, but we think that, as Larry Beals will explain, there will be townhouse units, and they'll probably be located around the perimeter of the property, up on the ridge, for example. Not on the property line, but 75 feet inside the property line. And then and they will not exceed 35 feet in height. Which is consistent with the R80 zoning for most residence districts in town. And then the height of any multifamily building will not exceed 85 feet in height, measured in accordance with the zoning bylaw. It's worth noting that in the MP2 district, which is the current designation for Newbury Court and the hospital, the maximum height of the building is 110 feet according to today's zoning bylaw. So we tried to stay under that. Now, with regard to the density and the height of the building, nobody is saying we're going to do that. We're saying we'd like some flexibility for planning purposes going forward. This will all be subject to site plan approval, and that's the number that we chose in order to have options. Obviously, the taller the building, the less the footprint, and we don't know exactly what we need for roadways, parking. We will probably service this with a groundwater discharge permit. Larry will talk about that in a second. What's the next slide, Elizabeth? So this is the footprint of the lot. You can see the major intersection down there is the intersection of Old Marlboro and Ornac. So we're right across the street from the hospital. If you make a left-hand turn, in that upper left-hand corner, you're right out on route, you're at the light on Route 2 going either east or west. 7 residences, as I pointed out, all now derelict. We've got access to public water, and we do propose through the DEP to get a groundwater discharge permit. Any system larger than 10,000 gallons has to go through the DEP. Larry will explain a little bit more. Our density calculation is pretty simple. We've got a total of 12.1 upland acres. There's no conservancy districts, so we'd like to get to as close to 200 for maximum planning proposal as possible. That yields a density of 16 minus units. And then lastly, on open space, again, all of it's dry. We'd like to keep a buffer between us and the golf course, which is immediately to the left of the buffer, and to the that would be to the west of the buffer, I think at the bottom. Is that south or
South there.
south? And that's the driveway going into the country club. So we're trying to be a good neighbor and at the same time meet the town's requirement for open space. And that open space would be committed to benefit the town of Concord and enforceable by the town of Concord. It would be pretty standard provisions otherwise. And here's the comparison with existing Newbury Court. The back area is all in green for a reason. It's wet. The total acreage there is 34.88 acres. The browner area that borders Ornac on the right-hand side is 18.4 acres, I believe. And if you divide the 301 units that are there by 18.4, you get 16 plus or minus acres. So we're proposing to take the concept of Newbury Court and move it across the street. And there will obviously be a connection, whether that's the same company or a single purpose LLC on each side of the street, or a corporation, a nonprofit corporation on each side of the street. We'll figure out as we go along. I'm gonna turn it over to Larry to give you some overview of the two architectural style.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Larry Beals. I'm with Beals Associates, and I have a pretty good history on this site. We did a little bit of work with the hospital on their undeveloped land to figure out what the potential was. And then we've been working quite diligently with Mark and with Chris to understand the site. This should be a little bit more exciting than the zoning. Site planning is always a little bit more interesting. But if I could walk you around the site, there is some significance to the colors. And if we start in the upper right-hand corner of the property, if you can read that, it says leach field. And as Mark's, he called it an esker. I'm not sure that's geologically correct, but it's the same type of soil. It's a very deep deposit of highly permeable sand and gravel. And over the years, I've dug thousands of test pits, and these soils are amongst the best I've ever seen. They're deep, well drained, ideal for construction. The groundwater table is deep, so there's good ability to filter sewage effluent as it goes through the profile. As Mark had said, whatever the program is out there, it's going to be over 10,000 gallons a day. So when you exceed 10,000 gallons a day, you're obligated under Title V and groundwater discharge permit regulations to provide a sewage treatment plant. So the development that would be on the major part of the site would all get collected to a sewage treatment plant, probably at the bottom of the hill. And if you've ever seen these, it's not really a sewage treatment plant per se. It would look like a barn or a carriage house, and a footprint maybe about the size of this building. It can be done quite nicely architecturally. And then it would be disposed of in that area. Sanborn Head did a number of test pits, borings, and modeling of the groundwater in the area, and determined that that area has the capacity to handle 40,000 gallons of sewage a day, which is more than the program would require, but it's always good to be slightly over-designed rather than under-designed. Now, the way the site works is the purple area in the center is a lower elevation. It's somewhat like a bowl surrounded by that ridge. And so if you were standing in the center of that, and if you walked to the left on the drawing or to the bottom of the drawing, you'd be going uphill. And there are grades that will require some careful planning. So we thought that for a lot of reasons, that perimeter area is ideally suited for independent living cottages. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner of that slide, what we used as a model is a project that we worked on in Winchester called Winning Farm. So if you're curious about what these look like, you can actually go and drive through it. But those are duplex units, and they would be situated beginning at the bottom of the hill, working up along the golf course, and then across the top of the hill. The good thing about that is they're lower, so they wouldn't be obvious from the golf course. Because they're individual footprints, you can step them up the hillside. And I think that's really an attractive area for independent living. Then in the center of the site, in our view, that's the best place for a multi-unit building, which would be a taller building because you're starting at a lower elevation. So whatever height the building has, it would be diminished by starting at the lower elevation. It's also right next to Emerson Hospital, which has some substantial buildings. So the theory is you put the big buildings next to the big buildings, and then you put the smaller buildings next to the open space recreational areas like the golf course. And the way we're planning it right now is access to the site would be directly opposite the driveway to the existing facility. It's always nice to have that four-way intersection. You can control the traffic a little bit better. So I'll chime in later on.
But the next slide has the multi-unit.
that's this slide. So, we're using these images as precedent images. These aren't designed when we're not sure that building is exactly the building that would fit there. But as you can see, compared to the winning farm model, these are multi-story, they're congregate living. It allows a lot more density and a smaller footprint. So the building in the upper left-hand corner would be located in that area that's the pinkish purple. So that would be the multi-congregate care portion of the site, and the independent cottages would be surrounding it on the green area.
If I could maybe jump in at that point, we are actively creating a market survey. So shortly, we will be surveying the market broadly for what the interests are. It's our obligation and our interest to create something that's the older adults in the community want to see created. And so that process is ongoing now, and I think the surveys will be visible really within the next month or so. And again, just in the meantime, we want to continue to communicate our commitment to service and our commitment to the community. Newburyport, as a not-for-profit, does do $1 million a year of charity care. We did a 10-year history of that, and it came to $14 million of charity care. Again, as a 20% minority, not-for-profit in the larger field of senior living, that's a pretty unique thing. The next slide shows a little bit about our contract, which, underscores that long-term commitment we have to residents through the years. And the slide after this will show, that we do offer an affordable program on the current campus. We have 28 affordable units. There's an income test and an asset test. It's a great program. And again, the charity care is listed. We are unique as a 501c3 in town paying taxes. We pay about $1 million a year of taxes. I think we're in the top 2 or 3 taxpayers in town. We did a 10-year look back of tax payments in addition to utility payments at CMLP and water sewer. And going back 10 years, it was an $18 million series of payments to the town. So, our hope is that we're seen as good neighbors. Our hope is that we're seen as contributors to the community. And there's a lot of opportunity ahead, but the demographics are not shrinking, they're growing. There's not one solution for that, but we see certainly ourselves as being the primary. I'm sorry.
So I think it's important that we acknowledge what we thought would be your reaction. One would be density. And I think we've tried to explain why we've chosen the numbers. Again, keeping in mind that it may not pan out like that. 2 is affordability, because it's such an issue in town. And so we've chosen to highlight the issue of affordability by putting a CCRC twist on it. We're not a multifamily rental in the context of Chapter 40B, where you can easily say that the affordable units are home to people who make 70 to 80% of the AMI adjusted for household size. It's very difficult in the context of these kinds of facilities to figure out what counts and what doesn't count in terms of shelter costs. And that's what the whole program for 40B is driven by. How much are you putting in for rent? How much are you putting in for utilities? How much are you putting in for other aspects of the care? So we wanted you to think about an alternative to the standard 40B affordability approach by examining the history of this institution over the past 15 or 20 years. And essentially what Chris is reporting is that there's an awful lot of affordability being added at the end of the tenancies of people who basically are now on Medicaid and are causing Chris to dip into his pocket to make up for the shortage that Medicaid payments result in when you have to take care of the person the same way you took care of them for the last 25 years. So we would like to put that on the table as being the affordable contribution. You can question in your own mind whether or not, when all is said and done, I think Chris told me today that Concord's at 14%. on the SHI. And I mean, you've got a couple of projects, we've got a couple of projects that are certainly going to add affordable units to the SHI, whether it's out at the Rotary or other places in town. So this is a chance to do something slightly different than the usual SHI tabulation that we've all focused on for the past 50 years with Chapter 40B. We're gonna go to parking now. So with us on the Zoom call here is Andy Arsenault. Andy, you there?
I am here. I am here. Can you all hear me? Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Arsenault, representing MDM Transportation Consultants. Tonight, I'd like to, first and foremost, be respectful of everyone's time and give a brief overview of our preliminary assessment of the transportation aspect for the project. As mentioned, the parking will be consistent with other similar operating Metro West continuing care facilities, which typically range from about a half to one parking space per unit. To give you a flavor, Newbury Court is just under 0.7 spaces per unit. We'll be providing one per unit. And to get more into the traffic aspect of it, one of the main items I do want to touch on very briefly, and I apologize in advance for not having a slide specifically depicting this. The primary site access is going to be provided off of Ornac, with emergency vehicle access only provided off Old Marlborough Road. So the plan and the goal truly is to not add left turning traffic off of Old Marlborough Road. Next slide, please. To move into that proposed traffic, we based our initial trip generation assessments on the most conservative of some similar applicable ITE land use codes, which is what we would commonly use for a standard for any assessment, as well as an empirical evaluation of the existing traffic associated with the Newbury Court. As you can see on this table, the volumes were generally consistent with one another, and we ultimately projected around 35 total trips, both entering and exiting, during the peak morning and evening rush hours, and a little under 400 over the course of an average weekday. Next slide, please. As a point of context, when we look at the former uses, specifically including that one building that was used as a childcare facility, we're anticipating around 15 fewer trips during the peak rush hours. Again, that's just a point of context, realizing that things aren't operating on the site right now and that everything's unoccupied, but we just wanted to provide some color and a kind of a reference point, a thumbnail gauge for what's going on out there. Ultimately, we took a preliminary look at the resulting impacts to the traffic on the roadway network. And given that modest amount of traffic that we're projecting, about one car every other minute, we did not notice a significant increase in motorist delays or a significant increase in queue lengths at the area intersections with the development of the site as a continuing care facility. As I had mentioned, I did want to be relatively brief this evening in my presentation. So with that, I'll turn back to Mr. Bobrowski, but I will be available for any questions this evening. I want to thank you all for your time and your patience.
So we'd love to hear now if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us, or if you have any questions that you'd like to ask us.
Go right ahead.
So my first thought, you're gonna have a hard time getting your presentation under 8 minutes.
Well, we didn't think we were gonna have a meeting, so we'll get there. Don't worry.
No, so I've met with them previously, and I will have offered to work with them to take this presentation and basically follow Linda's example from the MBTA community's presentation, have the initial presentation, then have backup slides. So I will be assisting them in putting together a presentation for the public hearing and for town meeting. That's all I wanted to say.
I have a couple of questions. Obviously, this is very preliminary. Okay, what are your thoughts on timelines for this? Do you have any idea on that? You've obviously purchased the property, so you have an investment in it, and you want to take advantage of that investment. Okay. You're coming before us now and going before the town to get overlay on this, but you really aren't sure what you're going to do with it, or?
Well,
these two gentlemen would have the best answer for that. I think from a technical perspective, Larry would be able to tell you what the civil protocol would be in order to get this thing an architectural design, and then from surveying the needs of the corporation, Chris.
And just sort of ballpark, that's all. Are we talking 3 years, 5 years?
I would hope for something in that range for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
You know, in terms of the zoning and the rezoning, you know, we're very aware that MCI is gonna take up a lot of oxygen in town. You know, at the next 2026, 2027 town meetings, and so, you know, we don't think we have the time to sort of wait in line behind that. You know, the real answer is we need to assure the project feasibility and be prepared to execute it. Again, we're not here to build something because we think it's a good idea. We're here to do something that the community is gonna respond to. And, you know, it seems reasonable that 3 to 5 years is the right time frame.
Thank you.
Just to add on the timeframe, if it gets rezoned to allow this, then we can commence with the design and the permit level drawings.
Right.
And that probably takes 6 months, and then you get into a permit process, and
Right.
you know, that can take a while.
Right.
And you know, nothing is assured. We have to go through a groundwater discharge permit. Rule of thumb there is it's at least a year. And because you have to demonstrate that you have the capacity, you have the treatment, and that you have no impact on the surrounding areas. So it will take a while.
There's no wetlands in the property you mentioned?
No, it's the first site I found with no
Yeah.
wetlands.
First thing we did, we surveyed.
And the river's not that far away, so you know, sort of surprised.
It's far enough.
Okay, yeah, no, no.
Well, and it's far enough horizontally and vertically.
Okay,
So we're up above it, so, which is what gives us a deep water table.
right, right. It would be interesting to see the elevations of the property. Okay, and you talked about that, and I'm not asking for it now, but I know at some point you will show us. I'm sure you've done it. Okay.
Yeah, we sure have.
Yeah.
So,
Which it does not need to be part of your town
Yeah,
meeting
no, no.
presentation.
And I didn't mean to take, I just, you
No,
know, you
it's-
talked about it being depressed in the middle and higher on the edges and stuff. And
Yeah, so we've actually modeled it. And then you can spin that model and look at it from all sorts. You can see it from the golf course, you can see it from Route 2.
Yeah.
Or you can get the image of what it would look like
Right.
from those areas. So that's, we knew we had to do that because that question would come up that you just asked.
Yeah. Interesting.
It is very interesting.
What's the change in elevation? It's 40, 45 feet, right,
Yeah.
at least.
We've drawn sections. We have more than 8 minutes worth of information.
And will you have to move dirt to be able to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's another permitting process you'll have to go through.
yes, but it's easy dirt to move. You know, we haven't found any bedrock, and sandy soils are pretty workable with a bulldozer. It doesn't take exotic equipment to do it.
Thank you.
Chris, can you say a little bit about what the buy-in model is going to be for this? Or is that not a good question?
No, so I mean, given that you've been at this for 40 minutes, I'd probably have the board kind of focus on the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay,
And not the project itself, because there is no project.
okay, all right, fine. And so we
That's
can just
okay.
forget that question. I'm really thinking more about the affordability and whether or not it would serve the community and, but if that's not where we want to go with this, that's fine.
Well, from a zoning perspective, I think, that's what, Chris's, comment was in 3 of the slides dealing with the affordability. And I've already started, putting down some notes for a presentation, because I'm sure, that question is gonna come up, that comparison between a normal 40B, which is, 25% has to be at 80% AMI, and this isn't a comparable type of project. So I think those slides will be important.
I guess that was my question, is if you do an overlay district, it's not specific to the owner. So all of this is about your affordability as an owner. But once the zoning goes in, you sell it to somebody else, they now no longer have those obligations. And that was the question that I had.
Yeah.
Was, is there an affordability
Yeah.
element that can be baked into the zoning itself?
I think
Or
you
does it
should be
need to-
prepared, to answer the question of like, you've always been a good neighbor.
Thank you.
people are you know, I'm sure half the people in this room have known somebody or had somebody, you know, at Newburyport, you've always been a good neighbor. If we do an overlay district and you determine the project is not feasible for you for some reason, and you sell this now larger parcel that has been rezoned to somebody who's not as good of a neighbor, are there considerations we need to look at in terms of density, affordability, all of those that would protect the interests of the town if it was a nefarious neighbor, so to speak?
I mean,
But just, I know that it's come up, I think, for a couple of us sitting here, so you should be prepared at town meeting to have a good answer for why this is the tool to move this project forward.
Can I just address that for a
Yeah.
second? There's a couple of tools of the trade. One is a development agreement that would run with the land, so if this outfit disappears, the buyer would be subject to the development agreement. It's a covenant that runs with the land, and it's benefiting the town of Concord. So it's a perpetual covenant. It doesn't have a 30-year shelf life, because this is a government entity we're dealing with. The second would be a sunset clause. I've written those into overlay districts. If we don't do anything in 3 to 5 years, it's off the books. It just goes away at that point. And you start all over again. So
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. The first alternative, the covenant already is written into the land?
no, we would be required under the zoning as I drafted it to enter into a covenant or a CR with the town as the beneficiary. We haven't drafted that yet.
Oh, I see.
It would be
Okay.
part of the site plan review process. We couldn't put a building permit until we did prepare the covenant and did enter into it with the town. It's usually something, because you're encumbering the land, it's something you do down the road.
Right, yes, but as has been pointed out, what we're looking at here is what we see before us and is the overlay district. So that has to be designed in a way that will cover any eventuality. As
Right.
little as you care for it to occur and little as we do as well. MGL, chapter 93, section 76, that's long-term care in general, is it not for profit? It's not specifically not for profit. Correct, okay, so I was just wondering if that. Nope, that is not part of it.
And this isn't a technical sort of argument or response, but I would say in general, you know, there are so few not-for-profit, strong not-for-profit communities left. It certainly is my hope that we can work together and preserve the 115 years of service we've given the town of Concord.
Yes, but that's unfortunately not written into.
No, that's true. No, that's true.
Yeah.
So something to have, the attorney think about, because I don't know, is whether this overlay district can be specifically written for a not-for-profit continuing care facility.
I don't think that's I think that probably goes to the home rule amendment prohibition on form of ownership. You can't prescribe no condominiums, form of ownership, rental or sale. But that's home rule amendment regulatory stuff. There are things people do all the time in development agreements that are entered by the town with the applicant for the zoning amendment. That's when it's the strongest vehicle, because you're not going to vote for the zoning amendment unless we have a development agreement. And we need to please you in fashioning that development agreement. We haven't talked about that at this point in time, but it's not hard to do that. And then town meeting would agree in the development agreement before the vote takes place that if the vote is positive, everybody signs off. And that you could put the promises in a document like that. Happens all the time.
There is a desperate need for retirement communities and long-term care in the town. What if they were rapacious monsters? Would we still approve of this particular overlay district? I wonder if it's written tightly enough. I only noticed a few things that seemed odd, like the very deep setbacks, which seem like poor land use especially fronting on a busy street. Moderately busy street, making it harder to get from the proposed location to Emerson and pushing parking to be in front of the buildings, making it car-centric looking. But on the other hand, maybe the plan was to keep it away from the cottages and back and to have, it seemed odd from a land use perspective to me.
Well, we could certainly tolerate, smaller setbacks in the front. Our hope is always to do underground parking. We just believe that if at all possible. And we have 6 underground garages in the current site, which is extremely difficult and extremely expensive, but boy, are they appreciated. And
Sure.
so, that would be our hope to have something similar.
I'm just thinking about this as a more general way of writing an overlay district, without it being specifically you, because it's currently not constrained to that. Can I noticed one odd thing in the, introductory paragraph. It says, which consists of 2 overlay sub-districts.
That is,
But then
remnant of an
later it
earlier
says
draft.
1.
a remnant of an earlier draft.
Okay, so that, out of date. I also thought it was odd that under 7.12.3, you refer to, units per acre located outside of the floodplain conservancy district. This is just a phraseology issue. When it says located outside, I can't tell if that means that it can exceed 16 units per acre inside the floodplain conservancy, which is obviously not true, but what a funny way of using this phrase, located outside, and I wonder if it can just be made more obvious for the
I think that,
reader.
I think
for
that
what
carries over from other provisions of the,
Well,
Does it?
yeah, it needs to be clarified. It's, 16 units per,
I'm not
upland acre.
having a problem with the sense, just the way that this is phrased,
Yeah.
that seems confusing. Now, I
per
did,
upland acre. On the acreage that's located outside of, so something to work on.
Yeah.
And then I know, Sue,
I
you
delivered
also,
some comments to you earlier. Can
Yeah.
I take it as given that?
I forwarded on, so
Oh,
we
great.
just haven't had
Okay.
time, so,
Sure.
again, the same thing with the 2 height definitions.
Mhm.
Those can definitely be, reduced so that they just mirror 6 to 11. So we can work on that one as well.
And what are we looking to do right now? Just
You,
listen to their proposal?
yeah, and raise the questions that
Okay.
that you have raised.
One thing I will note is mentioning that the current zoning for the hospital and Newbury Court has a 110-foot height limit, and you're asking for 80 makes it seem much more reasonable because it stands out as anything in town over 35 feet is terrible. And then the moment you said, oh, well, if it was exactly the same as across the street, we could go to 110. And it's, oh, okay, 80's fine. You know what I mean? It just, it immediately takes it down a notch. So it's just something it was a very good point, I thought.
I spent a lot of time without like eyeballing the hospital.
Great. If there's no other questions from the board, we will open it up for public comment at this point to see if anyone else has any thoughts on the presentation, whether in the room or online. And no one seems to be rushing to put their hand up, so, we do have, maybe Frank Feely or Matt Johnson. Matt Johnson seems to be there more consistently, so. Matt Johnson?
Hi, Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street in Concord, and I have parents at Newbury Court, just as a full disclosure, and I also am a member of the Concord Housing Foundation, though that's not a town board or committee. Anyway, speaking for myself, the main question I have is really about the townhouse units and the expected size of those units. The photos that I saw from the other development, those structures look like almost 10,000 square foot structures. So if they were duplex units, they would be very large. what's the envisioned square footage?
So they're duplexes, so.
Right, but per unit,
A couple thousand square feet. Yeah,
what, like 2,000?
yes, a little bit over 2,000. And the reason I'm hesitating is those units were specific for, it's not part of an age restricted community. It is age restricted, but not a CCRC per se. So they perhaps are a little bit bigger, a little bit more luxurious, 2-car garages in each one. And we use that footprint knowing that if that would fit onto the site, then a smaller, it wouldn't be any bigger than that.
Uh-huh.
And they're generally first floor living with a loft above or a second floor for guests or children or something to provide extra space. But most of the living by the residents occurs on the first floor.
And then it's a pretty steep hillside. I mean, accessibility, I mean, for this group, I mean, clearly it's independent living. Folks are accessible, you know, able to move around for sure, but I haven't looked at the topography closely. It's okay, huh? You're saying?
Well, I have looked at the topography fairly closely, and there are very nice level portions of the site. You know, once you get to the top of the hill, it's pretty level. The bottom of the hill is level. And then we just have to think creatively about how we bring that road up in front of those units. And you know, perhaps it's with a garage under, or the back of the building becomes a retaining wall. We haven't designed it yet.
Okay,
But,
and then
we've looked at it close enough to know that we can make it work.
okay, and then finally, I think echoing a little bit Elizabeth Hughes' earlier comments, just having been on the planning board, that the economy in adding language to the bylaw is something I really would appreciate. So, you know, not having redundant descriptions of building height, methodology, not referring to upland when, you know, you only have upland on the site and this is only an overlay district for this site. It just seems like, well, just cut out all the unnecessary details so that we don't have a lot of extraneous questions and concerns about getting deviations among different clauses in the bylaw. That's
Duly
it.
noted.
We just deleted the floodplain conservancy and the wetlands conservancy district.
Great.
Rich.
Yes, Rich Feely, 347 Lexington Road. Certainly Newbury Court's a wonderful place, but as I understand it, you have to own the house in Concord or the equivalent in the bank before you can get in. It's great that you don't outlive your initial rental, if you will. But is this going to change at all? I mean, not everybody who's old in Concord owns a house. And I'm just wondering if this is going to be accessible in some way to those who are not capable of making a buy-in.
Though I will say that's probably outside the scope of what we're looking at right here. If you'd like to comment, you're welcome to.
Yeah, no, happy to comment. I mean, one thing that is a reality on campus is that the buy-in levels really start around $400,000 and go to really twice that. And, you know, we do have as a community 60 units priced under $500,000. You know, I went on Zillow before I came here and said, is there anything listed on Zillow before? Not even close. And so, you know, there is a diversity. I fully understand, you know, it may not match for everybody, but between the current affordable units, between the units that we would consider more middle market units, and certainly the units that are maybe more spectacular, you know, there is a real range of what we do. And I think this will just continue to add diversity to that.
Chris, can you tell folks the minimum qualifications that you mentioned to me earlier today, 50,000 or?
So on the affordable program, and I'll admit that these numbers haven't been updated in about 15 years, which is maybe another sign of a good not-for-profit, but the income, you know, for folks with under 50,000 of income and under $300,000 of assets, you can qualify for those 28 affordable units.
And would there be additional units in the new land?
We're not currently conceiving that, Rich. You know, where we're really just early in the feasibility stage.
Okay, thanks very much.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Great. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you. Great job.
I'll move on to our next item of administrative, I guess it's next item, the first administrative item, public comment. So public comment is limited to up to 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes allocated to any one speaker. And it's limited to items which are not on the agenda. So items not on, in particular, I'm just gonna say not the warrant articles, which will be discussed as the next item. So if there's anyone who has any comments related to anything else. And if not, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is to finalize the 2025 ATM zoning bylaw amendments and vote to submit the warrant article. So the warrant articles were posted and distributed. We've had numerous discussions related to them, and we also received 3 letters of public comment related to them today, or I think they were distributed today or yesterday. And we have reviewed them, and I guess, is there any specific comment that anyone has related to the articles? Wait, I don't think we need to go through them all again, unless anyone would really like to.
I had a trivial
Yeah.
little wordsmithing issue with the
Go for
joint
it.
parking one. Which is merely that, it currently says another offsite location. And alternative offsite location under 7.7.2.7. And another offsite location means there must be an offsite location already, and that's not what we mean. We mean another location that is offsite. And, I suggest striking another and saying would be better served by
And
an offsite location. The planning board may authorize an alternative location off-site for, and yeah, that was it.
great,
No biggie.
no, that's a good catch, though.
I just wanted a clarification on the additional dwelling unit bylaw. Where it speaks about the in order to qualify, you have to meet the required lot size for that district. So what if, if it's a house that's in a property that's in a non-conforming, it's already non-conforming. How does that work?
So that's the waiver provision at the end of the bylaw.
Okay,
Somebody
then,
would
so it's a special permit.
file up for a special permit with the Board of Appeals. For relief from that requirement, if
Okay.
it's, a legal non-conforming lot. So
Yeah, that's what I
there is
thought,
a-
but I just
there is a
wanted to.
provision for that.
Didn't see that last one.
yeah, it's the last paragraph before the explanation.
I had a question on the same, zoning bylaw amendment. And this is just edification. Does another zoning bylaw amendment contemplate when you would have a duplex seeking to build an ADU?
No, that
No.
is currently not,
Currently not permitted.
No.
Okay,
it is only single-family dwellings.
only single family dwellings, okay. Even if it was a single family converted to a duplex,
Correct.
okay, okay.
And all we're really doing is matching it up to the state law.
Correct.
You know, they changed
Yeah,
the.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, I was just contemplating, I was thinking of this as I was driving down Hubbard and Everett and looking at all of these, a lot of them have like carriage houses, but a lot of them are duplexes. And when I went to look at the bylaw, I thought, oh,
so
that doesn't, yeah, none of those are ADUs.
It might,
some of them could be. So, it's a matter of terminology.
Yeah,
So you can have a single family dwelling and an ADU.
Mhm.
So some of the homes on Hubbard,
Yeah,
there's two addresses.
yeah.
It's a single family dwelling with an ADU.
Mhm.
They can't be legally separated and sold individually.
Yeah,
That's the primary difference between a single family dwelling and an ADU
Mhm.
and an actual true
family,
two-family.
got
A
it.
two-family, a lot of times they form of ownership, they
It
get
was
condoed.
Yeah, okay,
And then they can individually be sold. So under the current bylaw and the warrant article, you cannot have a two-family and then also get an ADU for each one of those units.
Got
An
it.
ADU is only be permitted
got it.
if it's a single-family
Okay.
dwelling.
That makes sense.
It's a true accessory.
I was like, there's gotta be a reason for this. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's helpful.
And to Mark's point, that's consistent with state law,
Yeah.
meaning that, and it is an accessory dwelling to a single family dwelling.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other thoughts or comments? I guess we can open it up to public comment. I already acknowledged the letters we received. Is there any other public comment online or in the room? Go
Hi,
ahead.
I'm Robin Garrison. I'm at 53 Middle Street. And I just want to say for the record that I'm not in favor of any of this. I'm not in favor of reducing the parking requirements overall. I understand that there's an intent of the bylaw to encourage commercial development, but it's very difficult when you're asking the residents of the neighborhood to reduce restrictions before something is developed. It's just, what I picture in my mind is a massive structure with, no parking. Or, 4 parking spaces with 60 units. It's just, I feel that it's leaving the door open for us to have to trust a developer to do the right thing. And I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening. I think that you guys are not taking into consideration the fact that the use is gonna change dramatically. And I know the intent is to utilize parking for more than one, I don't know, I remember the wording that you used, but for more than, to share the space. And I think that a lot of it is gonna overlap. What happens at 7 o'clock at night when the businesses are open and then the residents are coming home? I don't think it's reasonable that, there will be enough parking. And what will happen is what we see now, which is, because the businesses have changed over time, for instance, before it was Karma, it was La Provence. And I myself went to, a meeting and I was in favor of reducing the parking restrictions, thinking that, they're 2 restaurants, it'll be fine. But if I had a crystal ball or I could look ahead, I would not have been in favor of it. Now, what happens is the capacity is more in that restaurant and there's not enough parking. If anyone drives down the Rose Street now on either a Friday, Thursday, Saturday night, there's increased traffic and it's difficult to find parking, and the overflow ends up being on the side streets, meaning Middle Street, which is where we live. And what happens is you find restaurant customers going down the street, not sure where to park, it's dark, and they end up doing a 3-point turn and then coming around, going up and down. And you add the fact that we also have Concord Academy kids that use our street as a walkway or whatever. They use it as a way to get to the train or to the businesses. So you really have to keep in mind the long-term safety effects of reducing the parking and, also keeping in mind the density, nowhere here are you keeping in mind the density for the square footage of the parcel of land. So that's my concern, is that you're asking the residents just to open the door for anything, and I just can't support that.
Thank you. We'll go online. I see Carol Savoy's the first hand up.
Yeah, Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street. I wanted to make a comment about the parking proposals. I think that the joint parking it was intended to promote flexibility, but in reality, it's going to create more problems than it solves, leading to congestion, parking shortages, and unintended consequences. I think this proposal benefits developers more than the community, and reducing parking requirements allows denser development by shifting the burden onto shared lots. But there's no guarantee these lots will be sufficient, especially during peak times or busy seasons. Secondly, the assumption that parking demand naturally balances out is flawed. Businesses always operated overlapping hours, and shared parking arrangements don't account for seasonal fluctuations, remote workers, or overnight residential needs. With Concord banning overnight parking for 6 months of the year, where are these residents going to park when the parking lots are full? Third, enforcement is a major concern. There's no clear accountability if joint parking fails, if the businesses change to a higher traffic use, if demand exceeds supply, or if a congestion worsens. It's the community, not the developers, who will feel the impact. On top of that, we've already approved 1,000+ new MBTA housing units in our village centers and within a half a mile of the train station, many with reduced parking requirements. That means 1,000 new families moving to Concord's villages, significantly increasing parking demand. Before moving forward with this article, the town must evaluate how these new housing units will impact parking availability and whether existing spaces can accommodate this growth. Ignoring this reality will only create greater parking shortages. And finally, the claim that Concord has abundant parking doesn't reflect reality. Just look at CA's expansion. Parking waivers were granted and now nearby streets are packed. This is exactly the kind of issue we risk repeating. These amendments lack a clear parking plan. Instead of making a broad zoning change, the town should conduct real-world parking study, develop an overnight parking strategy, evaluate the impact of MBT housing parking needs, and require a case-by-case evaluation. Without these safeguards, these articles should not move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Johnson?
Yeah, Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street. I just wanted to follow up from our discussions last time to note that I had forwarded through Elizabeth a summary of the developer feedback on the proposed bylaw amendment for PRD density bonus. So I guess the group got that. I wasn't sure from the description of the letters. Then the second thing was that it was a good follow-up around the up to 2 times density discussion that we had last time. And I think after a further discussion offline with the developer, we're all set. We don't need to change the wording. The wording is great as is. I think we don't need to worry about it. So that was it.
Great, thank you.
I'm actually reminded of a comment I meant to make earlier after reading letters that were submitted to us from members of the public. It's a fair point that in terms of shops with seasonal characteristics, an ice cream shop and especially a pop-up retail store are maybe not the most obvious, common, or realistic examples. And I wondered if we should strike that from the joint parking article explanation, but I don't have a very strong feeling about it either way. And rather make it part of the town meeting presentation. It's not in the language of the article itself, it's only in the explanation anyway, last sentence thereof.
And then the other, as far as the explanation, which is not going to be printed in the warrant this year, it'll be, the warrant will be, part of the Concord Bridge. And so explanations won't be printed in the warrant, and there's going to be a town meeting book that will have the articles and all of the explanations. Two notes as far as in the explanation would be, adding a little bit more information about how the parking is calculated based on the, hour by hour analysis, so that the number of spaces that are provided on the lot can accommodate the highest hour parking demand, and then also a little bit more explanation about how if a business use changes, that use would not be permitted until the building commissioner does an analysis. They provide the hour by hour analysis, and he makes a determination that the existing joint parking along with a new agreement is submitted. So I was just going to add those 2 points to the explanation.
That's nice.
Isn't there also a right to reserve if there is a problem down the road?
Yeah.
I was just
To go
gonna,
back,
yeah, so I was just
you know,
gonna ask
so-
about that.
Yeah.
So in the joint parking, I'm under, let's see, I'm under 7.7.2.4 subsection blah, 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 blah. E, the approval of joint parking facilities may be rescinded, and additional parking shall be provided by the owners in the event that the planning board, after notice and public hearing thereon, determines that the joint use is resulting in a public nuisance or other adverse effects on the public health, safety, and welfare. How do we envision that process working? So if then we go back to them and say, okay, additional parking shall be provided. What would that switch look like in terms of like practical? Yeah, you have two businesses, they're using joint parking, it causes a problem. Planning board has a hearing, we say this has created a nuisance, you have to fix it. What does that look like in practicality? I think that'd be helpful for people to kind of understand that there is kind of a fail-safe here. Oh, this has caused a problem.
Right.
The unintended consequence
Right.
has occurred. This is how we're gonna fix it.
So the building commissioner would be the one through zoning enforcement to receive the complaints. And then notify the planning board, and then the planning board would hold a public hearing and have that property owner and probably the property owner who would bring the business owners to come and have that conversation. Why is there this, these issues and concerns? What has changed from when, this was approved? And have that conversation with them on how to address the issues, concerns. And it may be, change in hours. It may be, you need to, increase, the available parking that that you have.
For example, by building out some reserve parking.
That's
Or
one option, or, looking for other, offsite options. Or, again, it would be up to them to figure out how to reduce their overall demand, or have that conversation with the board and come up with a solution.
So in reading the letters and the public comment related to parking surrounding Concord Academy, that would be the process? Would it be that now that they've completed their construction and I mean, I know they were under construction, so it was hard to actually judge what the parking usage really was, but.
So that's different because they literally have
They don't have
reserved
joint.
parking unbuilt on the site, and the building commissioner could make them build it if he
Well,
determined.
that's the question,
are.
is if there's a concern about the nuisance that CA's parking has created, those complaints should be addressed to the building commissioner, is kind of what I'm saying, right?
Oh, not the planning board, I see.
And then it comes to us.
And then it
That
comes to
comes
us as
Yeah,
part of a.
Okay, so I'm gonna
That,
stop.
that's
But
right
that's
there.
Yeah,
not
right.
joint parking.
That's
That's
not
not joint parking.
joint
No, but I'm just saying, in the discussion of joint parking, that came up a lot, and that's like a different animal, and that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to separate.
Concord Academy is not joint parking.
Yeah.
That's a parking
Concord-
waiver, and
So
Parking?
we've envisioned joint parking a specific remedy for a nuisance that's created.
no, this is if you're developing something that doesn't have sufficient on-site parking,
Yeah.
you do a joint parking.
That's what I'm saying, is for joint parking, we've envisioned a process by which you remedy a nuisance. And that's what we're proposing,
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
For,
a joint parking
Concord, for
agreement. Yeah.
Concord Academy, which is
Different.
not joint parking, that's relief from parking. And they have not received their certificate of occupancy permit. They haven't opened up the new parking lot. The special permit that was granted for Concord Academy specifically has a condition. They did an analysis as part of their request for relief from parking. I don't know the time frame, whether it's 6 months after occupancy.
6 months.
But but it has to be, let's say they got occupancy in December, they can't do the analysis in June. It has to be between, like September, October. They are required to do the same analysis that they did for the requested relief, to document that they have the sufficient parking that's based on their requested relief. If it is determined that what they had, proposed as part of their requested relief, then they have reserved parking in other areas that they would have to construct.
But we haven't even seen that issue because it was really more concerned about when they have something going on at their new facility. And they were gonna have a lot of people at that, correct?
So
mean-
that's
And we haven't even seen that.
that's also a different,
Another different.
different
Right.
scenario, as part of their special permit, as part
Right.
of the library special permit and the umbrellas special permit. Those three entities, it's taken this long, but very close to having a joint agreement that deals with, those three entities scheduling, events, coordinating on events being scheduled, the major events, not having major events, all three of them, scheduling a major event at the same time. So they are executing a formal written agreement. So that's additionally something else.
Yeah.
So,
But my point is that for the concerns of specific to joint parking, there is part of the amendment that has contemplated unintended consequences and that we
Right.
provide a process for remedy if what we hope doesn't happen actually happens.
So,
Okay.
I mean, at this point, these are issues and concerns that, whoever, takes on this, as we move
The
forward and
presentation.
develop the presentation,
Mhm.
issues and concerns that should be addressed.
Yeah.
So, right
Yeah.
now, it's, whether the board wishes to move forward and submit these articles, because, it has to be
Tonight.
has to be done tomorrow or Thursday, or if not, then somebody else will need to do it before the 19th.
Can I make a comment on what you're discussing?
Oh,
Now, something to consider, if it becomes a public nuisance, it's gonna be too late. What are you gonna do? So there's gonna be a complaint. You're gonna ask them to tear down a whole building because there's not enough parking? It's not realistic. You're gonna ask them to find off-site parking? It's just not, that's not realistic. I don't think that's a very good backup plan. Something to consider.
Casey Winslow?
Hi, Casey Winslow, 160 Lindsay Pond Road. I was just basically gonna say the same thing that the last lady just said. It's like you can't unring the bell. You can't backpedal and say, oh yeah, this is a remedy that, may or may not. And the idea that the building department is gonna take the complaints, that just feels kind of awkward and just it feels like a lot of uncertainty we're opening up ourselves to. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carol Savoy?
Yeah, so I wanted to make another comment. This is about the change of use. That, while the goal might be to support business growth, the proposal fails to consider the real impact of parking in our village centers and neighborhoods. By eliminating additional parking requirements when a business use changes within the same square footage, this article assumes all businesses have the same parking needs. But a restaurant, a retail shop, and an office all operate very differently, and ignoring these differences leads to unintended consequences. We've already seen this played out when La Provence became Karma, parking demand skyrocketed. When the West Concord market transitioned to Woods Hill Table, the shift in peak hours and customer volume overwhelmed available parking. And as office space converts to residences, overnight parking issues will only worsen, especially given Concord's winter parking bans. We all support economic vitality, but this article does not take a balanced approach. By assuming all businesses have the same parking needs just because they occupy the same space, it risks long-term parking shortages that will be difficult to reverse. Smart growth requires careful planning, and this proposal falls short. A case-by-case approach is the better path forward. I urge you not to advance this article. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So with that, does the board have any other comments before we move, or whether we want to move forward or not? If so, we would need a vote to finalize and submit the warrant article.
All together?
I have concern about the warrant article, including residences in the change of use of business. Okay. Don't you think that's going to be it's one thing to change business. I understand that. That simplifies things. But when you layer residences on top of that, don't we lose control over what's going to happen? And I don't know, just my thoughts. Okay.
Will that still have to come to us?
For combined business residents.
Yeah.
So current under the current bylaw, there are, especially in the commercial districts such as Concord Center or West Concord Village and Business District. As the current bylaw is written, there isn't a single business that could meet the requirements. It would have to be a special permit either for parking or open space. Should there happen to be a business that can meet both of those, then it's still site plan review. So it would come to the planning board for site plan review.
So under the new warrant article, if we moved it forward, we would have site plan review over it, where we could have some control.
Yes, but the warrant article as proposed, again, we can take the example that was provided. Phillips Paint.
Right.
So you have Phillips Paint.
Right.
And the second floor, there's only
Right.
3 spaces on that property.
Right.
So if they were to convert that, then they would still have to come through the planning board for site plan review, but they would not need to move forward for a special permit for relief from parking.
But in the site plan review, the planning board could. What would be the, what would the planning board be looking at in site plan review if they don't have to go for a special permit?
How would they address trash? For that example, they can't meet the open space requirement so they'd still have to get a special permit, but, you know, let's say they met the open space requirement. Then it would just be, you know, how, you know. How would, you know, is there adequate, you know, access?
But nothing
between?
about parking.
There would be no, additional parking required because of that change of use based on the
The way it's written.
the way it's proposed currently.
Under site plan review, can't we ask for, a parking plan? For example, some developments, with residential components. There have been, like information to be provided to residents about how they can get around town.
Yes, I mean,
Because that would be a way that, to say as part of site plan review, that you must inform your tenants that
that
it
could be
doesn't
a
come
part
with
of
a
that
parking
conversation.
space, and you better understand that you're out of luck if you want to be able to park a car in winter.
So that would be part of the application process, conversation with site plan review. But that's, you know,
Yeah.
currently as,
But it would be under site plan review, yeah.
yes. So
Yeah.
currently as the warrant article, you know, has been drafted, that's not part of,
The article itself,
Part
only a
of
site
the
plan
zoning.
review would be required.
well,
Yes.
for combined business residents, site plan review is always required.
Yeah,
It's whether somebody would need a special permit or
Right.
not.
Am I reading too much into it?
I'm not.
that's not town staff's,
Yeah. Commenting on that one.
You know, we talked at length about
It's a
the,
fundamental question, and I always looked at it as if the proposal is housing, they're gonna need to figure out a parking spot.
Yeah.
And in Concord, parking is not a public good. It's not something that you can just say, yes, you can park on the street because
right,
we have street parking and it's not, you know, that's a public good. So they are privately going to have to figure something out. And whether it's short-term, long-term, or whatever, that is something that will be on the owner and the resident to figure out. And it's basically saying, look, if you are turning the top floor of Graham, whatever building that is, into 6 residential units, and you're just saying there's no parking, 6 people may say, you know what, great.
right.
And
And
just,
I'm taking
and
the
just
train.
move in, because I'm getting rid of my car anyway for a whole other host of
Right.
reasons, and now I live downtown.
Right.
And my kid lives next door and they can drive me, and that's just the end of the discussion. That, then it's a perfect unit for someone.
Okay,
And instead of getting in the way and saying, okay, well, they don't have this 21-foot by 9-foot or however big a
Right.
parking spot is space, you can never do that. It's just,
no, I'm all for.
yeah,
not
that's
getting in
the way
of
I look
stuff
at
like
it,
that.
is
That's-
it's a
okay.
private problem that a private person is going to have to deal with. And this isn't we're not talking about a developer coming in and putting up a 4-story building and
Right.
saying, great, no parking. We're saying the existing structure,
Right,
you know, and they're gonna have to figure out a whole host of issues with that if they try something like that, because I don't know what sewer capacity looks like for those buildings. I don't know anything.
Well, if you just stick with the parking question, it's really removing a barrier for someone who wants to develop a residential space above a commercial space. They don't have the barrier of you have to
Right.
provide that parking
Right.
space.
Well, they
extra parking
probably
space.
do from practical
But-
standpoint, but
yeah,
they don't
but-
have.
But the
to.
town's not getting in the way of
It's
that.
not getting
they
in
can
the
get
way.
approval to go forward without having a special
And
permit.
so, and then
Okay.
that then allows for
Always,
those
always.
people who don't want a parking space.
Right.
To rent an
Right.
apartment above Phillips.
Right.
Lovely place, you
But
can walk.
site
the
plan
train.
review, we'd wanna make sure we have a bicycle rack or something like that in
Yeah.
there, okay?
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's the kind of thing that we can do with.
Or
site
what's
plan
the
review.
exterior egress situation look like? Are there fires? You know, all the things that are like a little bit more
Okay,
maybe planned.
all right, thank you.
So that's just the way I look at it.
And I see it as a matter of trade-offs. I mean, it's true, uses are different from each other. And, some uses may have more of an impact, but our economic vitality is also of value to us, and we're trying to balance, very limited detriments that may occur from changes of use with, benefits from increased economic vitality in residential space. So it seems like a reasonable trade-off to me.
So
Even
at this
for-
point in time, this is that particular article is something that the EBC has asked the board to submit on their behalf. I think there's been quite a bit of conversation and discussion. I mean, the EBC will be the one to give the presentation at the public hearing and at town meeting. I think this is all great conversation.
But
But-
our discussion now is whether to move these forward, but not that we are endorsing them. That would come after the public hearing, we would, or should we feel enough conviction in the articles now to actually be endorsing them? That I'm just want to make sure that.
Well, there have been
When-
cases in the past, even what was a year or two ago, where
Somebody had a
we
win.
had an article, we moved it forward, we put it on the warrant, we supported it, we later discovered flaws in it, and
They recommend no
and we
action.
withdrew it. These things can happen, but so we're not committing ourselves
Well, I just wanted to know. well,
to
was this
supporting it
a,
at town meeting. Yeah.
just where we were in this process.
So the process is a little bit different this year. Generally, yes, you just vote to submit an article, having, some some confidence in that article, and then have the public hearing, and then after the public hearing, the board usually does its report and votes whether to recommend affirmative action or no action. This year, the request, because of the new town meeting booklet that will come out before I think before the public hearings. So your public hearing is April 9th. I think the request from the town moderator is that motions, be submitted by March 28th. And then, so it would be, the direction is, if the board had questions, regarding an article, it would be, we're gonna have to work on how to craft that, that motion by the 28th.
Well, from a procedural standpoint, under town meeting time, we could amend our own motion on the floor of town meeting if push
Correct.
came to shove.
Correct,
And certainly we would try to avoid that,
correct,
but we do have that option if necessary.
correct.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, with all due respect to the timeline that they've set forth, but I think there's tremendous value in the hearing that we have
I
and
know.
Yeah.
the feedback
Yeah.
that we get. And my feeling is that that opportunity for a wider public audience than we typically get at our meetings to be heard and to provide us insight and input overrides the desire to have it, the booklet and all this. My feeling is that I really value that public input that happens at that hearing, because there may be a voice that brings us either something in support or something in opposition that hasn't been considered before.
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable, wholeheartedly committing to the whole slate until we receive that I'm totally comfortable moving them all forward, having the hearing, taking into account all of the public comment that we can solicit then. I mean, that's just the way I feel in terms of like procedure and transparency.
I will let the town moderator know if that's
Yeah.
if that's the consensus of the.
That's my feeling. I may be an outlier in that, but
But if it becomes a town meeting issue, we can always recommend no action on something that we sponsored basically saying, look, the EBC came forward with it, but we're saying.
We're not
It's not an
sponsoring
endorsement.
We're not
it.
saying, so it's just, it is a little, it's funny, yeah.
We're not-
No,
We can put our own article, it's
But
fine, if we have to.
Couldn't our, isn't our role to review these things and talk about them for months and get information and then we come to the, and I'm new at this, I'm really asking a question. We come to a point where we can say, there's no compelling reason not to bring this forward at town meeting. In fact, there's some compelling reasons that maybe this would be a great idea. But we don't have to endorse it until we finally endorse it. Until we say affirmative action.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you have your 6 articles that, you are the sponsor. Then you are submitting on behalf of the EBC, the 2 articles. And then, you're submitting on behalf of the Concord Housing Foundation, the article on the PRD. And then you'll have the, five articles. I think there's a total of 9. or
And
10.
we're not submitting anything for the continuing care.
That's a
That's a citizen's
citizen's
petition.
petition.
Okay.
So,
As a matter of procedure, is there a reason why the EBC and the PRD are not submitted as citizen petitions and they're submitted as, we submit on their behalf?
Right.
I'm just
Because
curious,
the
I'm just
other is a
curious.
Zoning, I don't understand
That-
why, if it's
No,
zoning, I
that's-
thought it had to come through us.
No,
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 there's,
citizen petition can be anything.
so,
That's my own like procedural.
so under
curiosity.
state law, there's, select board, planning board, and citizens petition are the 3 methods for a zoning bylaw amendment to be put forth on the warrant.
And is it just as a matter of practice, we've submitted on behalf of the EBC in years past, or?
I'm not aware of the planning board submitting a warrant article on behalf of,
Anybody?
because I don't think there's ever
Nobody's
been
asked.
that,
Got it.
I don't think that's ever been asked.
Yeah, I just didn't know if this was like a precedent that
No.
we had done this in years past, cause I.
No,
haven't-
no
I had
precedent,
no
but
recollection of
no,
it.
no,
Barrier to doing it.
no barrier, no precedent, it just, it hasn't, the EBC's only been 2.5 years. I think,
Well, it existed before I came on staff.
yeah, so I think it's only like 2.5, less than 3 years.
Okay.
And, the, Economic Vitality Committee, sorry, I try not to use acronyms. And so. So, and I, when the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust was put forth, that was, put forth through the select board. So, this
Yeah, but that
is,
wasn't a zoning.
no, but there haven't, most other zoning items that deal with affordable housing have been part of, like, when the planning board did quite a few changes to the PRD, bylaw. It was part of something that the planning board was already working on and got input from, the various housing groups. So, it's not that, you can't, or there's some precedent you should or shouldn't. It's never come up before.
Are we committing to putting forth those 3 articles? Or are we gonna defer that to the EBC and the housing authority? And then the actual presentation at the town meeting?
oh, the presentation.
So, the presentation would be, the EBC for those and the Concord
Okay.
Housing Foundation, Matt.
Yep.
Ran through his presentation for you. That would be, the
Okay.
presentation he would put forth.
Thank you.
So then. Well, we still have to make a decision. On those articles, in addition to articles that,
You will still need to vote you will still need to prepare your report, by law under the zoning act to town meeting, and your recommendation on whether each zoning article should be no action or affirmative action.
Including the continuing care.
Correct.
So
You're required under the
Okay.
zoning act
Good
to
take
make a
care.
report to town meeting on all zoning articles. Regardless
Regardless of who's putting them on,
regardless
yeah.
on how they got on the
On the
warrant.
warrant, if the zoning is on the warrant, we have to make a
Yes.
recommendation.
And our task tonight is to determine whether or not we're going to say, go ahead, put these on the warrant.
Put these on the warrant for town meeting to, through the public hearing process. And through town meeting to discuss and vote on. So once the article is submitted and it is on the warrant, it is on the warrant.
Right.
So even if you were to, after the public hearing, make, vote that,
No action.
no
No
action.
It's still there.
That
You
article
could
is
have.
Still
still
there,
there,
it's still there,
and
yes.
somebody, if the planning board, let's say it's one of your articles, let's say it's the housekeeping article, and you decide, you didn't think of something, and after the public hearing, the planning board, recommends, no action on that article, you would not move it. That does not preclude anybody else on town meeting to get up and move that article.
Yeah.
So it's still on the warrant.
Yeah.
But it still sends a message that if we say no, or recommend no action, it's not gonna be a.
Sure.
Yeah, so,
Sure thing.
so in other instances, the example Sue gave when, and I forgot which one it was, it was a planning board article that after the public hearing, it was just like,
We didn't think of that.
didn't think of that and didn't think of that, and so we really need to think about that. The planning board recommended no action and gave a reason why. So I would imagine for, any article that's on the warrant where the planning board voted no action would have, a brief explanation.
So I guess at this point, the question is there a reason for us not to move forward with the next step on these 7 articles? It's 7, right? Or not even 8?
Well, how about if
We keep talking about
move
different numbers.
that
We
the
can,
planning board, place the whole schmear on the warrant, not the citizen petition one, the other, end article which Elizabeth is diligently counting,
throw out so many numbers.
however, so many it may be.
5 that are ours.
So it's 8 total.
Well.
The citizens petition is separate, they're
That's
moved their
separate.
own.
Right, and that's why I left.
That's why
it
you make
at-
it clear this is.
We have to make a recommendation,
Okay.
But that'll be later.
we don't.
But
have
not
to.
tonight, we have to do exactly nothing about it tonight.
Yeah.
So you have a warrant article for section 7724 joint parking and 7727. You have a warrant article for the commercial district's parking requirement. You have the housekeeping warrant article, the PRD warrant article, sign bylaw, floodplain conservancy district, accessory uses,
ADU.
and ADU and the accessory retail.
Right.
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 That's
Eight,
it.
8 total. ADU, accessory retail and industrial, sign bylaw, floodplain, commercial parking, that's the joint parking, right? Oh, no,
Joint parking.
commercial parking, joint parking, and the PRD, and then the general corrections.
Was that 8?
It's 8.
Okay, apparently I moved that we place those 8 articles on the warrant.
Do we have a second?
A second.
And then all those in favor?
Right.
And any opposed or abstaining? No. Great, so that's unanimous. So those move forward. Yeah. It's administratively, it's like, yeah.
Quick question. So Matt could have made his warrant article a citizen's petition.
Correct.
If he'd wanted, anybody could do that.
Correct.
Yes.
Or they can come to the planning board or board of selectmen
Correct.
and ask them to put it.
It's just that we have to review it. We have to take.
We have to
We have to take
Yeah,
a position on any zoning related
Correct.
warrant article.
Whether it's a citizen's
Misunderstood.
petition or not.
And the
Right.
town will perceive it as having more weight that we reviewed.
Right, and
Right.
we'll also have town council
Right.
right along with it and all that stuff, so.
I think that, there have been instances where, either finance committee or somebody has said no action on something, and the
Sure.
town has
Oh,
gone
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's done both ways.
The school budgets.
The school budget happened last year.
You sat through this and you didn't say anything?
I should have said something, but the others said.
They said what
Said it all.
we said.
You still have.
We still
Have to go to
business,
town
correct?
meeting.
Still a few more things.
So
Okay.
people will be hearing first.
Oh,
A public hearing.
yes.
Well, there's a public
Yes.
hearing before.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what
So
we were just
can-
discussing.
We can
Yeah, I
speak
didn't
out in
get
public
that.
hearing.
Absolutely.
The 9th of April.
Yeah.
That's the public hearing.
That's-
Every,
Yeah.
there's another public hearing that's
Yeah.
for all, just, none of this other business, just warrant articles.
Okay.
Well,
And it,
And we'll go item by.
just
What
the
is
planning
the
board.
so
date?
it's in
They
the
do it every.
It's in
Yeah.
April.
April,
Thank you
Oh,
for all the time all of you put in. It's-
April 9th.
April 9th.
A hearing for their.
But you get what you pay for, no money's changed.
Sorry, we still have business.
You still have a meeting?
We're still in
The
the meeting.
meeting.
Sorry.
Okay.
There's one meeting that's just for the planning board articles, where
Okay.
you can come and speak and question and
April
comment and.
April
That's
9th.
one I need.
Okay.
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 Thank
Okay.
you for coming.
That sounds right.
Next item of administrative business is the planning board liaison town planner update.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first update is Thursday night, Board of Appeals, I just want to put this so everybody's aware. The 275 Forest Ridge Road comprehensive permit is being continued to February 27th. So that they can provide additional information and revised plans. So I just want to get that out there. The second item is more of a heads up for what's next on your plate for zoning bylaw amendments. As the board knows, you have Emily Innes will be coming, I think, your next meeting, March 3rd. I gotta look at the agenda. To talk about the mixed use, previously combined business residence, but updating that zoning bylaw. So that's one.
Emily says.
The consultant that the board is working with.
Who we met over the site plan rules and
Yeah,
regs for.
she's really
MVP.
I've only seen her on Zoom.
So there's that item. Obviously, the board will be actively involved in MCI Concord once through the visioning process, and then developing the process for developing zoning for town meeting next year. And then there's the next phase in parking, which will be updating the relief from parking and incorporating new transportation demand management aspects into relief from parking. And then the fourth thing is going to be amendments to the wireless overlay district. So as everybody is aware, there's significant issues in the community. And also the current wireless overlay district is woefully out of date as far as compliance with federal law. And it was written before federal law has been established, case law has been established, FCC requirements have been established. So that is something that is going to be one of the and is currently now one of the highest priorities for the select board. And will be something that the select board and the planning board will be embarking between now and June, which in June is usually when the board does their goals and projects memo for the next year. Because it's wireless overlay district, to get you jump started. The planning division, we will be now getting information from, town council on, where things are just completely, either illegal or, not in compliance in the current bylaw, as well as looking for other communities that have more up-to-date wireless overlay bylaws. Hopefully finding, some that also have historic districts with, that incorporate that, because that is a conversation that has to happen. But also taking in consideration new technologies. Our bylaw does not speak to 5G or small cell service sites. So we're hopefully gonna start gathering all of that information. So those are gonna be your 4 big things. I'm hopeful there's nothing else.
You got the nasty P word in there already, so. Parking.
But so that's, that's just, that's probably my biggest update. For your next meeting, the board should decide who's going to be doing which presentations for your 6 articles. And then, I'll, as in previous years, put together the first rough draft of a presentation for you. And your second meeting in March, and I think it's the 23rd or 26th, I can't remember the dates, 25th. That will be your one and only run through as a board, because your
Before the
public hearing is, so it's gonna be, sorry, I'm going on vacation. So,
Are you leaving tonight?
no, we leave Saturday morning. So I'm gonna just apologize, but yeah, the presentations will be, I'll be working on those when I get back.
We'll be here, not to worry.
The only thing I want to mention before you hit me, somebody had said it earlier when the prison takes all the oxygen out of the room. 2229 may be another one where there's probably going to be discussions about zoning that as well, I would think. I know it's zoned industrial right now, but
I don't see.
I don't know what the
that-
timeline is, so.
Yeah, I don't see that on the same,
Warrant article,
on,
same- okay.
on the same timeline. There's, first off, because, the same visioning process that's happening at MCI Concord would have to happen for 2229 Main Street. And already there is definitely concern with not just committee burnout, but citizen burnout. So that's, really something we're gonna have to kind of manage. And I don't think the cleanup is,
I didn't remember
Even-
what the
No,
timeline
it's
was.
not
so-
ready yet.
it's not even,
Yeah.
yeah. I
It's
think-
not even on the
Yeah,
horizon.
no,
Okay.
I think it's.
29 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a few.
I knew
years
they were
old.
making progress and
Oh, yeah,
every,
they're making
kumbaya, but I
progress,
couldn't
yeah.
remember whether it was 3, 5, or 7 years, so it's.
Still got a ways to
Yeah.
go.
The only other update I have is that on Monday, March 10th, I'm working with our consultant team for the Assabet River Multi-Use Bridge and Trail to do 2 little quick public update sessions. One is in this room. One is 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. And then the second one is the same day, 5:30 to 6:30 at night. So they're both gonna be the same. There'll be a little short presentation from the consultants. And then it's just open for, questions and answers. But just really to kind of give an update on where, where we are, timeline. What are, some of the hurdles that we need to, get over as the project advances.
Awesome. Does anyone else have anything to add? Liaison updates, nothing?
The only other MCI Concord update I have is that the request for proposals went out to hire a consultant to do the visioning and the zoning. And I think 4 responses came in. The team interviewed 3 and they did select a consultant and is moving forward, executing the contract with that consultant. So
It's a group led by a company agency out of Cambridge.
So they are ready, as they said, to start the sprint on that project.
Right, I think today they were supposed to finalize the contract. I don't know.
Don't know.
And then it's.
That is definitely
No, I-
not my monkey and not.
Okay.
Question, so it doesn't relate to the meeting.
Okay. So with that, I think we're all set for the night, so I will close out. Thank you all for coming and attending online. Have a nice rest of your month.